So where were we? A couple of months ago, I was fortunate enough to meet my soulmate. His name is Dave, the alpha who saved me from some bullies in school, and the 4 bad guys. They eventually got expelled after the school's investigations. I know how embarrassing things were at first. An Enigma getting bullied. Embarrassing, right? Trust me, I thought the same thing. Back then, I was the quiet type. The type who preferred books over fists and peace over trouble. My parents are ridiculously rich, so life was always comfortable for me. But comfort doesn't stop people from targeting you, especially when they think you're weak. And to be honest, I really looked weak. Slim body, thick glasses for my poor eyesight, always avoiding people like a plague. Sometimes I wondered if I was even worthy of the Enigma title. Enigmas are supposed to be powerful, dominant, and untouchable. Meanwhile, I couldn't even win a fight against 4 bullies. Luckily for me, Dave appeared like some hero in a drama. Tall, handsome, muscular. The kind of alpha that makes people shut up the moment he walks into the room. The thought bothered me even more when I looked at Dave, because my baby Dave, the handsome alpha who everyone secretly admired but pretended not to stare at too long, actually had more muscles than me, which was both impressive and mildly humiliating at the same time. If a strong wind blew too hard, I might actually fly away. Now don't get me wrong, Dave never once made me feel small. In fact, he was the exact opposite. Always walking beside me in that calm, confident way of his, occasionally flicking my forehead whenever I overthought something and telling me to relax before my brain exploded like a badly coded computer program. We became practically inseparable, sitting together in lectures, sharing lunch, sometimes arguing over which movie to watch in my campus apartment while Dave complained that my taste in films was suspiciously terrible. And before we even realized it, people in school had already started whispering, "Those two are definitely dating." Every time I heard that, my ears would turn red. Dave would just smile and throw his arm around my shoulders like it was the most normal thing in the world. I swear he enjoys watching me panic. But something else started bothering me. A new student transferred to our campus. Evan Giggs, the spoiled son of the state commissioner. From the moment he arrived, he started acting like the entire university belonged to him. Throwing orders around. Pushing people aside. Treating Omegas like accessories. I watched him one day from across the courtyard, and something inside me snapped. He reminded me too much of the people who used to bully me. That day, I quietly added his name to my blacklist. Evan Giggs, enemy territory. And honestly, he became the final reason I decided to change my physical looks. So during the first campus break, while everyone else was on vacation relaxing and posting beach photos, I was suffering at the gym. Day 1, I nearly died. The trainer looked at me like I was made of glass. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked. I said yes. 5 minutes later, I regretted every decision I had ever made in life. My arms and legs were shaking. Even my soul was shaking. But I refused to quit. Day after day I kept going. Weights, push-ups, running. They all amounted to more suffering, more pain, and more determination. Because this time, I wasn't doing it for revenge. I wasn't doing it for popularity. I was doing it because I refused to remain the weak version of myself. Because if someone tried to hurt Dave or anyone else in front of me, I wanted to be the one who could step forward, not the one hiding behind him. This time when I returned to campus, things were going to be different. No more nervous Morrison. No more easy target. And definitely no more gentle era for me. By the time the campus break was halfway gone, I had already made it a habit to visit Dave. I drove toward the new estate where his family recently lived, the familiar scent of delicious delicacies floating through the air. I pushed open the small gate and stepped into the yard, walking confidently like someone who is no longer considered as a stranger but family. Before I could even knock properly, the door opened and there he was. Standing there in a simple shirt with his hair slightly messy like he had just run his fingers through it, looking annoyingly handsome as usual. His eyes scanned me from head to toe in a way that immediately made me feel like I was being inspected by a very attractive security guard, and his brows slowly lifted as if something about me didn't quite match the version of Morrison he remembered. He leaned against the doorframe with a small smirk and said, "Hold on, what happened to you?" I blinked innocently. "What do you mean?" Dave folded his arms and looked me over again, this time more carefully, his gaze lingering on my shoulders before narrowing slightly. Did you get bigger? I coughed awkwardly and rubbed the back of my neck before giving a small shrug. Maybe a little, I admitted. I started working out. The silence that followed was dramatic enough that even the neighbor's dogs stopped barking for a moment. Dave stepped closer, his expression shifting from teasing to curious. You, he said slowly. Working out. I laughed softly, though there was a small seriousness hiding behind it. Yeah. Came to show you the little surprise package I cooked up the past 3 weeks, I said. Dave smiled proudly. I got tired of being the good guy who hides behind you every time something bad happens. For a moment Dave didn't say anything, and then he suddenly moved closer until the space between us almost disappeared. Before I could even react, his fingers gently lifted my chin, tilting my face upward so I was forced to meet his eyes. Dave's gaze softened in a way that always made my chest feel strangely warm. You don't need to change anything about yourself, he said quietly. I love you exactly the way you are. My heart immediately did something very unprofessional inside my chest. But I shook my head slightly. You don't understand, I murmured. My siblings already think I'm the weak one in the family, the quiet failure who hides behind books and glasses while everyone else runs the world. Dave frowned slightly. What about that? If someone ever tries to hurt you again, I want to be the one standing in front of you, I said boldly. For a brief moment Dave simply stared at me as if he was trying to process what I had just said. Then suddenly, without warning, he leaned forward and kissed me. My brain completely stopped working. I swear my soul almost left my body again, and this time it wasn't because of gym training. Dave's lips were warm and confident, and I stood there frozen for a second before my face exploded into the color of a tomato. When he finally pulled away, I looked around the house in immediate panic. Dave, I whispered urgently. He blinked innocently. What? We are literally in your family house, I hissed. Your parents might see us. Dave glanced toward the hallway casually before shrugging. They're in the backyard, he said calmly. My heart was still racing like I had just finished a marathon. I rubbed my face and groaned quietly. You're going to get me killed one day. Dave only laughed softly, clearly very pleased with himself. The change wasn't just physical, it was a shift in the very air I breathed. Even at home, the silence was different. My parents and siblings stared at me over breakfast like I'd been replaced by a high-end bodyguard. I was broader, taller, and intimidatingly hot. I kept the glasses though. They didn't make me look like a nerd anymore. They made me look like a calculated predator who knew exactly what you were thinking. The following week, the new semester kicked off. Usually, I'd take a taxi to avoid attention. But the gentle era had been buried. I pulled into the lot, the engine of my new sleek personal car purring like a caged beast. As I stepped out, the atmosphere on the quad shifted. I could see the Omegas stopping in their tracks, their whispers following me like a tailwind. They were used to seeing Morris in the shadow. Now they were seeing Morris in the bright morning sun, built differently, dressed in quiet luxury, and looking back at them with a confidence that felt almost dangerous. I told you, a familiar, warm voice rumbled behind me. I turned to see Dave. He was walking toward me, his smile so broad it could have lit up the entire campus. He reached out, his hand resting on my shoulder, a shoulder that was now much wider than it used to be. All that hard work paid off, Morrison, he whispered, his eyes gleaming with pride. You look incredible. I let out a small, rare smile. Only because I had the best motivation, I replied. We walked toward the Faculty of Management Sciences together. Being in the economics department while Dave was in accounting meant our lives were constantly intertwined, but today we had a shared lecture in the main auditorium. The power couple energy we were radiating was enough to make the hallway part like the Red Sea. Talk about the devil himself. Evan, the commissioner's son, entered the room like he was a Greek god descending from Olympus. He had 2 Omega girls trailing behind him, literally carrying his textbooks like modern-day servants. He didn't even look for a seat. He just walked up to a small Omega boy in the front row and tapped the desk. Move, Evan commanded, his voice dripping with that spoiled, untouchable arrogance. Go sit in the back where you belong. The boy started to tremble, clutching his bag to his chest. He stood up, ready to run, but my blood started to boil. I remembered that feeling. I remembered the cold pit in my stomach when guys like Evan decided I wasn't human enough to have a seat. I didn't even think, I just stood up. Sit back down, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the chatter like a knife. The room went dead silent. Evan froze, his head snapping toward me. He looked me up and down, his eyes narrowing as he tried to process who I was. Excuse me? Evan sneered, stepping closer. Do you know who my father is? I don't care about that, I said, stepping out from behind my desk, closing the distance until I was towering over him. The seat is taken. Go find another one at the back. I hear the air is better back there for people with oversized egos. The students gasped. It was like watching a high-stakes movie. Evan was an S-class alpha. He was used to people fainting at his scent alone, but he wasn't a match for an enigma who had found his true power. The air in the room became heavy, thick with the scent of ozone and burning cedar. Evan was pushing his alpha dominance out in waves, trying to crush me, but I didn't budge. I pushed back, my enigma pheromones wrapping around his like a chokehold. The omegas in the room began to whine, the pressure becoming unbearable. Just as the tension reached a breaking point, the heavy click of the professor's heels hit the floor. That is enough, the lecturer shouted, slamming her books onto the podium. Stop this childish display of dominance and sit down, or you'll both be spending the semester in detention. The pressure vanished instantly. Evan glared at me, his face twisted in a silent promise of war, before turning on his heel to find a seat in the far corner. Dave leaned in, his hand catching mine under the table. Ignore him, Morrison, he whispered, though I could see the spark of excitement in his eyes. He's just realized he's no longer the biggest shark in the tank. I sat back, adjusting my glasses with a smirk. The lecture was starting, but I knew the real lesson today had already been taught. The thing about people like Evan, the sons of someone important, is that they think power is the ultimate life support. They think it's about shouting in hallways and throwing sense around. But I grew up in a house where power was a whisper. It was the sound of a pen on a multi-million-dollar contract. It was the silence before a merger. When the invitation for the annual state charity gala arrived, I saw Dave looking a bit hesitant. He's an alpha, sure, but he comes from a hard-working middle-class background. He didn't know that this gala wasn't just a party, it was my call to put Evan where he belonged. You sure you want to attend the party tonight, Morrison? Dave asked me as we were studying. It's going to be full of those political types. Evan's father is the guest speaker. I just smiled and adjusted my glasses, a small dark spark in my eyes. Trust me, Dave. I wouldn't miss it for the world. In fact, I've already had a suit sent to your house. Don't check the price tag, just wear it. Dave looked at me in disbelief. You are so full of surprises, he said, resting his head on my shoulder. I wouldn't want to go anywhere without you by my side. I whispered. Originally, the party was supposed to be attended by the big men in politics. My elder brother was away to attend to some business projects overseas, which meant that I was next in line to step out with my father. I had to beg him to allow an extra invitee, which is Dave. Of course, my dad knows I wouldn't bother myself to come if Dave was not on the menu. We are both dedicated to each other like a lifeline. The night of the gala, the air was crisp. When we stepped out of the car, I felt Dave's hand instinctively tighten around mine. He looked incredible in the charcoal gray suit I'd picked for him, but I could tell he felt like an outsider. Just stay close to me, I whispered. As we walked into the grand ballroom, the crystal chandeliers made everything look like it was dripping in diamonds. And there, right in the center of the room, was Evan. He was wearing a bright, flashy white suit, holding a glass of champagne and surrounded by a group of admirers. He looked like he owned the place. When he spotted us, his face twisted into a smug grin. He walked over, trailing his pheromones like a bad perfume. Well, Evan sneered loud enough for the nearby socialites to hear. I didn't know they let campus scholarship students into events like this. Did you sneak in through the kitchen? Or did you just follow your bodyguard here? He gestured to Dave, laughing as his friends joined in. Dave's jaw tightened, I could feel the alpha in him wanting to snap, but I stepped forward, my face a mask of cold, billionaire calm. "Actually, Evan," I said, my voice carrying across the immediate circle. "He didn't sneak in. But I am curious. Did your father tell you whose house you're standing in?" Evan's laugh died. "What are you talking about?" Before he could answer, a hush fell over the room. My father, the man whose name is on the side of half the skyscrapers in this city, walked down the grand staircase. He didn't head for the commissioner. He headed straight for us. "Morrison," my father said, his voice booming with pride as he put a hand on my shoulder. "I was wondering when you'd arrive. And this must be the Dave you've told me so much about." The silence was absolute. I watched the blood drain from Evan's face until he was as white as his suit. "Evan," I said softly, leaning in so only he could hear. "My father is about to decide whether or not to fund your dad's next term. If I were you, I'd go find a very quiet corner and stay there for the rest of the night. Or maybe, go check if the air is better in the kitchen." The color in Evan's face faded as he grumbled and walked back to his annoying friends. Dave and I slipped out onto the balcony, the music from the ballroom fading into the distance. He let out a breath he'd been holding for an hour. "You're a terrifying man, Morrison," Dave laughed, pulling me into the shadows of the stone pillars. "A billionaire enigma? I think I'm in over my head." "You're the only one who isn't," I replied, reaching up to straighten his tie. "Because you liked me when I was just the nerd in the hoodie." In the moonlight, Dave looked absolutely stunning. He smiled softly and leaned down, his forehead resting against mine. I should have known that a snake like Evan wouldn't just crawl away into a corner. While I was standing there, discussing the future of our family's holdings with my father, my eyes kept drifting back to Dave. He looked so regal sitting there, even if he was just nursing a glass of water. "Go sit with him, Morrison," my father said with a knowing smile. I nodded, but as I turned to walk back, I saw a waiter placing a fresh glass of red wine on Dave's table. Dave looked up, surprised, but the waiter pointed toward the bar as if it were a gift. Dave, being the polite alpha he is, drank wholeheartedly. I was still 20 feet away when I saw his expression change. He didn't just look uncomfortable, he looked haunted. He clutched his stomach, his face going pale, and before I could reach him, he had stumbled toward the hallway leading to the private restrooms. By the time I got to the table, he was gone. I picked up the glass and my enigma senses immediately flared. It wasn't just wine. There was a sharp, chemical undertone, something designed to trigger a forced, painful reaction in an alpha. I pulled out my phone, my heart hammering against my ribs. I called him severally but no answer. That was when I felt it. From the direction of the hallway, a massive, unstable wave of alpha pheromones began to leak into the ballroom. It was Dave, but it wasn't the Dave I knew. It was sharp, explosive, and agonizing, like he was being forced into a premature rut. The guests around me began to murmur, the Omegas in the room looking distressed as the air became thick with Dave's uncontrolled power. My vision tunneled. I didn't care about the gala, the donors, or my father's reputation. I walked straight through the crowd, people parting for me like I was a tidal wave. Evan didn't see me coming until I was right in his face. I didn't say a word. I just reached out and grabbed him by the lapels of his flashy white suit, hoisting him upward until his toes were barely touching the marble floor. The Omegas around him shrieked. Evan's smug laughter died instantly, replaced by a look of pure terror. "Where is he?" I hissed. My voice was a low, vibrating growl that seemed to rattle the chandeliers. Evan tried to maintain his smirk, though his hands were shaking as he tried to pry my fingers loose. "I don't know who you're talking about, Morrison." "Liar," I growled. "Where is Dave?" I repeated. "Why would I care to know about your boyfriend's whereabouts?" Evan sneered. "Maybe he just couldn't handle the high life." I tightened my grip, pulling him so close that our foreheads were almost touching. My enigma pheromones were no longer in control. They were a death sentence, wrapping around him until he began to choke. "Listen to me very carefully, you pathetic excuse for an alpha," I whispered, my eyes burning with a light that made him flinch. "I know what you did. I know you spiked that drink. And if so much as a single hair on Dave's head is harmed, if he suffers for even 1 second because of your cowardice, I am never going to let you go scot-free. I leaned in even closer, my voice dropping to a terrifying calm. I won't just ruin you. I will make sure that the name Evan becomes a ghost in this city. Evan's father and my dad were at the very far end of the party, where they were having a meeting. Unknown to him, his son was here standing before me like a frightened mouse. I didn't care about the gala anymore. I didn't care about the hundreds of eyes watching me as I stormed through the hallway like a man possessed. All I could feel was the chaotic, pained vibration of Dave's alpha pheromones. They were screaming for help. When I finally kicked open the last restroom door, the air hit me like a physical wall. The scent was overwhelming, heavy, metallic, and sharp with agony. Dave was on the cold marble floor, his suit jacket discarded, his breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. Dave. I breathed, dropping to my knees. He looked up, his eyes glazed with the forced rut the poison had triggered. He looked exhausted, his body fighting a battle it was never meant to fight. Without a second thought, I pulled him into my arms. I didn't care if his uncontrolled power tried to crush mine. I was an enigma, and I was his anchor. I carried him out through the center of the ballroom. My father looked surprised when he saw me. But I couldn't bring myself to answer his questions. He saw the look in my eyes and turned to his lead security detail. Clear the way, my father commanded, his voice cold and final. And get a specialist to the hospital immediately. The next 14 hours were the longest of my life. I watched through the glass as doctors worked to flush the toxins from his system. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I just sat there, my enigma instincts coiled like a spring, waiting for him to come back to me. As the morning sun began to bleed through the blinds, the heart monitor finally settled into a steady, peaceful rhythm. Dave's eyes fluttered, then slowly opened. I was at his side in an instant. I reached out, gently taking his hand and pressing a soft, lingering kiss to his knuckles. I'm so sorry, Dave, I whispered, my voice thick with a guilt that felt like lead. I never should have left you alone. Not even for a minute. Dave gave a weak, tired smile, his fingers squeezing mine with whatever strength he had left. It wasn't your fault, Morrison, he rasped. I saw the waiter. I should have known. I'm positive Evan did something to spike that drink. But I don't have the proof. Of course. He's the commissioner's son. He's a professional at hiding his tracks. I turned back to him, my glasses catching the morning light. Evan thinks he's playing a game of politics. He forgot who he's playing against. I walked to the door and signaled to the 2 guards standing outside. They were my father's best men who knew how to find things that didn't want to be found. I want the waiter found, I told them, my voice a low, terrifying calm. I want the security footage from the kitchen, the bar, and the hallway. I want every bank transaction Evan has made in the last 48 hours. If there is a single digital footprint, a single whispered conversation, I want it on my desk by sunset. I looked back at Dave, a dark promise settling in my chest. Evan thinks he's untouchable because of his father's title. But I'm going to make sure he learns that in this city, there is no title high enough to protect you from an enigma who's had enough. You wanted a war? He's got one. After a couple of days, my father's men gathered enough evidence. By noon, I had the security footage showing the handoff between Evan and the waiter, and a digital record of a bonus payment sent to the waiter's offshore account. Evan thought he was being clever. He thought his father's title as commissioner was an invisible shield. He was wrong. This ends now, my father said, his voice like grinding stone. He didn't call the local precinct. He called the police commissioner directly. The conversation was short. My father didn't ask for a favor. He gave an ultimatum. Evan hadn't just pranked anyone. He had used a controlled substance to induce a medical emergency. If it had been actual poison, Dave could have died. The commissioner knew that if he didn't act, my father would use his entire billion-dollar network to dismantle the department. The fall was swift. Evan was expelled from the university. He spent 3 days in a cold, gray cell, a far cry from his white suits and luxury dorms. His father used every ounce of political influence to get him out on the 3rd day, but the damage was done. In our world, a scandal is a disease. No one wanted to associate with a commissioner whose son was a criminal. My father's partners pulled their contracts, and by the end of the week, the untouchable family was a social pariah. But I didn't care about their ruin. I only cared about the one person resting in my home. I took Dave to my personal estate, a place far away from the whispers of the university. For the first time in weeks, I didn't want a chef or a servant to handle things. I wanted to do it myself. I spent the evening cooking for him, the scent of fresh herbs and searing steak filling the air. Dave sat at the island watching me with a look of pure adoration. He looked better, his strength returning, but there was a lingering intensity in his eyes. "It smells amazing, Morrison," he said softly as I placed the plate in front of him. We ate in a comfortable, intimate silence, the moonlight reflecting off the pool outside. After the meal, Dave stood up, but he was a bit unsteady. He leaned against the counter, his breathing hitching. "Morrison. Back there, in the ballroom when the rut hit me, I felt like I needed you so badly. It was agonizing trying to control it." I didn't let him finish. I reached out, my arms sliding under him as I lifted him into a bridal carry. He was an alpha, built and strong, but in my arms he felt safe. "You don't have to control yourself anymore, Dave," I whispered, my voice vibrating against his chest. "You're home now." I carried him toward the master suite, the only sound being the soft thud of my footsteps on the plush carpet. I laid him down gently on the silk sheets of the bed, hovering over him. I leaned in, my glasses sliding down my nose as I captured his lips in a kiss that tasted like a promise. It wasn't the kiss of a gentle nerd or a cold billionaire. It was the kiss of an enigma who had found his soulmate. "I promised you once that I'd step up my game," I murmured against his lips, my hand cradling his face. "I'm never letting you go. And I'm never letting anyone hurt you again. I will always protect you." The war with Evan was the last time anyone dared to test us. For the rest of our university years, Dave and I were a fixture. The enigma and his alpha, moving through the halls of the economics and accounting departments like we already owned the world. We didn't just graduate, we dominated. And on the day we walked across that stage, degrees in hand, I didn't just see a diploma. I saw the beginning of our real life. My father didn't just give us jobs, he gave us an empire to build together. We spent the next year working side by side in the heart of the family company. With Dave's precision in the numbers and my enigma instincts for the market, we were unstoppable. The staff used to whisper about how we worked. We didn't even need to speak. A single look from Dave across the boardroom and I knew exactly what he was thinking. We weren't just partners in a company, we were two halves of a whole. One evening, after a particularly long day of closing a major merger, the air felt different. It felt heavy with the same magic I felt the first day Dave saved me from those bullies. I turned him around to face me. He looked tired, but his eyes were full of a peace I'd spent my whole life looking for. "Dave," I whispered, reaching into my pocket. "You saved me when I was a shadow. You stood by me when I became a storm. I don't want to spend a single second of this life without you by my side." I dropped to one knee, holding out a ring that caught the dying light of the sun, a band of black diamond and platinum. "Will you stay with me? Not just as my partner in the office, but as my husband." Dave didn't even hesitate. A tear escaped his eye as he laughed, pulling me up before I could even finish. "Always, Morrison. It's always been you." I pulled him close, our lips meeting in a kiss that tasted like every victory we'd shared and every challenge we'd overcome. The gentle era was long gone and the billionaire war was won. Now there was only us, and us meant forever.
And that finally wraps up part 2 of Morrison and Dave's journey. I honestly loved seeing Morrison finally embrace his enigma power to protect the person who first stood up for him. It just goes to show that true strength comes from the heart. It's not just the gym, okay? So I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who supported part 1 of this story. Your comments, your likes, your subscriptions actually helps me shape the direction of this transformation. And I'm putting in a lot of work into the quality of these visuals and the storytelling to make sure you guys get the best experience possible. If you enjoy the glow up and the justice they finally got, Please hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. And before you go, let me know in the comments, did Ivan get what he deserved, or was Morrison too easy on him? I'll be reading your replies. So until next time, see you guys. Stay safe. God bless you. Bye.